So these type of videos are always my favorite type of videos to make just because we get to talk about these older gaming consoles, and what's crazy is we just got these newer gaming consoles, the Xbox Series X and S and the PlayStation 5s, and hopefully Nintendo makes their new Switch, but it all originates from somewhere. And today we're talking about the original Microsoft Xbox, the super original one, and seeing how it holds up in 2021. Now, obviously, I'm not going to say whether this specific console is still worth it, because I think it's a legend in its own right. I probably wouldn't recommend just buying it as a gaming console, but I think this thing still has a lot of amazing titles, and I would honestly say buy it as a collector's item. This thing is a beautiful collector's item. It's going to probably appreciate a lot in the future. Maybe it's already appreciated. I look at consoles like something like the PlayStation 2 Slim, the Nintendo Wii U, even the Nintendo Wii Mini, even the PlayStation P Go. These things increase in value over time. The Game Boy Micro is another one, and they're really good consoles to pick up, especially these, beginner introduction ones. Now, this specific console came out in 2001, so it's actually turning around 20 years old, which is so crazy. Can you even believe that? Now, I think it originally came out a little bit later, so, eventually it got, re-released, and all those other, iterations came out, and then the Xbox 360s and the Xbox Ones. But again, with this original console, it's super crazy just because, we get to look at it and we actually get to play with it. And the design of this console, growing up, first of all, I didn't own the Xbox. I owned a Game Boy Advance and a PlayStation 1, but this console was one of those consoles that everyone talked about. And I think you also had internet connectability with this type of device as well. So you're really kind of branching out in so many different areas, and this device was killing it in terms of the graphics at that time. I think, Nintendo was great for story mode games and portable games, but Xbox, I'm still surprised they haven't released a portable console. Now, looking on the outside of the Xbox, on the front, you actually had, the power button, so you can go and, boot this thing up. I think you had a memory card expansion port somewhere around this whole entire console, and then you also had the eject tool for, the discs to come out and everything, but on top of that, you had the controller supports coming out, and we might as well hit it on the controllers, because this is another huge aspect of it. This is the originator of probably one of the best controllers that ever came out. I think a lot of people will probably agree that the Xbox 360s were the best controllers ever, but it's still pretty insane because that originated from this type of console. Now, you have pretty much the same setup as we have on the new Xbox Series X and S controllers. You have the two joysticks, you have the D-pad, you have the keys on the side, the start select buttons and all those things, and the Xbox logo right in the middle. So I think that's actually really cool. I still love this controller, and I think it completely holds up. And I like the GameCube controller too a little bit. I don't know why, but for sure this controller kills it in that specific area. Now, this thing originally was announced, and it was supposed to be kind of in the competing market against the PlayStations and I guess the portable consoles of that time. But since this was an at-home console, they couldn't really tap into those portable consoles. But we saw at that point, just like how we see now, that portable consoles and at-home consoles kind of live separately. We see that, with portable consoles, most people will own, an Xbox or a PlayStation, and they'll also own a Nintendo Switch or some other type of portable console. And I feel like that's kind of what was happening at this point as well. Things like the Game Boy Advance or the Game Boy Advance SP or the Game Boy Micro or any other portable gaming console at that time, you tend to own one of those, and you also own one of these too, which again is just another huge thing. Now, this thing was sold, I guess, from 2001 to whenever the Xbox 360s came out. But what's crazy is that as of May 2006, they sold 24 million units, which is so crazy. And the Xbox 360 eventually shattered that, and the Xbox One, I think, shattered that one too. But that's so crazy that it all started with this type of console. Now, there were streaming services for this type of console as well. Now, what's crazy is that apparently from this Wikipedia article, from the Microsoft Xbox, they couldn't really keep a steady profit for this thing. Meaning that they sometimes, I guess, would make money, sometimes they would lose money. And even though this thing was a super popular console, it actually ended up losing about $4 billion during its market life. Now, that's crazy when I read that, but it's also important to think that I think that was more of an investment for Microsoft to kind of, they had to dig that money deep into, I guess, $4 billion for this type of console. But if you look at it now, I'm sure they're making way more than $4 billion off their newer consoles. If they weren't, then they would probably not make any more consoles. But again, that's just another really awesome thing that they had at that opportunity. Now, this console was definitely more powerful apparently than the other consoles that were coming out at that time. It also had a built-in hard disk, which I think was pretty new at that time. It had, internet connectivity, like we said. It had an Ethernet port, which is great. And eventually with Xbox Live, which I think this is the thing that makes Microsoft the most money in terms of their Xbox, this, subscription-based thing. It was the fee-based online gaming service. It came out a year after the console's launch. That, I think, was the thing that kind of made, Microsoft probably make a little bit more money off their consoles. And eventually they released their Halo games for these type of consoles, and a lot of first-person shooters, and just a bunch of games in general. And it's crazy that this thing could sell those many consoles and still not profit that much. It's definitely super insane to me. Now, this thing outsold a lot of other consoles, but it didn't outsell the PlayStation 2. I think the PS2 is probably one of the best-selling consoles. I think it is still the best-selling console or whatever. And just looking at where we started with this console and seeing where we eventually came to with the Xbox 360, I think going from the Xbox to the Xbox 360 was a crazy improvement. I mean, we saw so many different things come out, better graphics, more expandability. I mean, it's just so crazy, more like such a more powerful console. And even when I still play with the Xbox 360, I'm surprised about, the graphics that we're getting from this thing. And this Xbox pretty much was the originator of it. Now, there were a ton of games that came out for this type of console as well. I mean, any console, any game you play, I mean, probably had some sort of port for the Xbox, the original one. And I think for just the gaming aspect of this thing, I think it is worth it. As I said in the earlier on in the video, I think it's more worth it in terms of an investment. So if you're actually planning on buying an Xbox to play video games on, this is probably not the one. I would recommend getting like an Xbox One S, or if you want to get the cheapest one for the best price. But the Xbox, I mean, for a collector's item, just based off the games, just based off the, just what this console brought in general, is super insane. And it's worth a lot just in that standpoint. Now, like I said, I think there was a little bit of an improved, version as well, but eventually they had to discontinue it because the next console was coming out. But I think this Xbox, for sure, what it brought to the table, and just for the imprint that it had for Microsoft, and the fact that it was losing Microsoft money probably for the whole entire eternity of it, but they eventually kept making it, and now it's a pretty profitable, side business for Microsoft. It's just super insane to me that they were actually able to make something like that. And I think at the end of the day, that in and of itself is worth it just to pick up. I think this console brought a lot, and the fact that it was one of those main competitors compared to a lot of other, gaming manufacturers. We look at PlayStation, we look at Sega, we look at all these other ones, even Nintendo. I'm glad that Microsoft took a chance and built out a gaming console for themselves to eventually, hopefully supersede a lot of other consoles. And look at it now. I mean, with the Xbox Series X and S, and with the PlayStations coming out, a lot of people are still trying to buy them. A lot of people, it's definitely just built a culture out of, gaming consoles, which is super insane. And that's why I think the Xbox is worth it. It's just, has so much sentimental value to a lot of people. And I would recommend it. If you have an Xbox, keep it. It's probably going to go up in value if it hasn't already, especially 20 years in. The fact that it's had this much of an imprint in 20 years is so insane to me. So in terms of that pretty much covers it up. If you want to pick up the Xbox, like I mentioned, links will be down in the description. If I find an Xbox One S or 360 or whatever ones I'll find, links will be down in the description. You get them from there. Also check out my website, cheapphones.co. Really appreciate it. Hit the like button, but definitely hit that subscribe button. All those links will be down below. I'd really appreciate if you guys to check it out. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.